for our opening words. Today I chose, do you know that there's a lot of really wonderful readings in the back? So if anything ever gets a little dry in here, you could just open up this and read along. Some different things, different authors and things. But today I'm going to be reading from one of my mentors, the late Robert Eller Isaacs, who I worked with when I was in St. Paul before I moved here. And this is one of his probably most famous writings. It's called A Litany of Atonement. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For those and for so many acts of both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. Any young people out there want to come forward? I see some young folks in the back, some young in there, some young at heart, some cool kids. Any cool kids still welcome? Anyone want to come forward? Okay, so good morning, everyone. Were you hoping for a foot of snow and you just got sprinkles today? That's a bummer. But yeah, who would like to open the Wonder Box today? Okay, Ben. Oh, perfect. I'm gonna lift it up. It's kind of heavy. Okay. Oh, perfect. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was needed. Thank you, Finn. Oh, a tissue box. Yes. Why did I put that in there? Why do you think I put that in there? So my daughter, one of my daughters, not this one, would always get upset with me when I pulled out the tissues too fast, and I would pull out all but like the last little bit. And she wanted the whole tissue because her nose needed the whole tissue, and so I'd have to get another one. Very gently. Okay, good. And then we can blow our noses. I have a little runny nose this morning. Excuse me. Oh boy, this is very like Gallagher a little bit here this morning. So, but the thing is that it's really easy to rip a tissue. And I tell her this. I say, sorry, I ripped the tissue. It's not like she feels like personally attacked, like I hurt her. But, you know, our tissues, how easy is it to rip a tissue? Really easy. Oh, pretty hard, pretty easy. And I'm wasting all these tissues. The environmental action team's coming after me. Okay, so, but you know what's harder to rip? It's harder to tear? A shirt. But I know some of you have done it, playing out on the playground, playing out roughhousing, at a crazy concert where you're just kind of like at a rave or something. You go to those? And sometimes shirts rip. Thankfully, when shirts rip, unlike the tissues, there's something you can do with a ripped shirt or a ripped dress or pants. What can you do, unlike with tissues? This would be a little hard. What can you do with a shirt? Yeah. You can stitch it back up. How many of you have ever done that? You don't just say, ugh, waste. I'm going to throw that out. No, you're going to reduce, reuse, recycle. If you have to recycle, if it's too gone, or you turn it into a little crop top or a halter, or you turn it into something else. You can reimagine it into a different piece of art, right? Okay? So, but I saw a lot of hands going up, so that's really good. So I do not know how to stitch or sew or things like that. I think our crafting group is restarting up soon, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, so that's shirts. Okay, you know what's even harder to tear? Your friends. Yeah, I said it. But it's more of a metaphor in this case. Sometimes we hurt one another. Have you ever hurt one of your friends at school? Maybe said something mean? No? None of these kids? Okay, how many of you have accidentally or purposely said something that has hurt a friendship? It's okay. I'm not going to look. And yeah, and we all say things sometimes, right? Or sometimes they're really big things, sometimes they're small things. Sometimes they're small things to you, but they're big things to someone else. And at that time, do we get out the needle and the sewing sticks, or whatever they're called, and we start fixing it? No, we can't do it that way. We need to do something else. What do we use instead of our needles when we're trying to mend our friendships? Our words. I didn't even tell you to say that. That was good. I never tell her. She's not a plant. Our words. We use our words. Our words can be really good. Our words can be really good. Sometimes you're not sure which ones to use. Sometimes you need a lot of them. Sometimes you just need one or two or three. Like, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'll do better. And then sometimes also beyond our words, what are something else we can do to repair our relationships? Not just our words, but our be nice through our actions, right? So it's not just our words sometimes. Sometimes we need to do nice things so that they believe that your actions will change. So again, that's a far cry from the tissue, but to me that's how we got there, and we're sticking with it as the object lesson for today. And so today, Scott and I are going to talk a lot about mending and fixing things, and things sometimes that seem small, and sometimes things that seem so big. How could we ever repair them? But how important it is that we all are working on that work together. Okay. So when you go out, I hope you have a wonderful time in classes. I know our youth group is putting the final touches on their March 8th Youth Truth Sunday, where they're going to lead the whole service. They kicked me out. They said, we don't need you, which is okay. They're going to lead the service. It's going to be awesome. So they're putting final touches on that, and you all are going to have some good lessons today as well. So let's sing our kids and youth off to their classes now.
I am always pleased to come back here to this place, see friends. I had the pleasure, and my wife and I had the pleasure a few weeks ago of meeting your fine intern minister, Judson Webb, who came and delivered a superb sermon and conducted the service in Bloomington. What I'm going to do is read from a book that's in progress, a real brief piece. And this is something I never do. In fact, I never have done. I've never read from a book that's underway before the book is finished. The only person who sees it before it goes to a publisher is my wife, Ruth, who's in the back row, which shows a degree of wariness about how engaged she might be. So this is the foreword to a book called In Praise of Mending. And I hope it'll give you a little flavor of what I'm up to and what kinds of damage I'm concerned about the need to mend. And then we'll have a conversation afterwards, and I don't know whether there'll be a time for comments and questions from you all. So this is fairly brief. There are scars scattered about my body. Pale streaks in the ruddy skin, some from surgeries, others from mishaps with knives and saws. The small scars mark wounds that healed themselves, requiring no more treatment than a cleansing with soap or alcohol and pressure from a cotton swab until the bleeding stopped. The long scars required stitches, which usually meant a trip to the hospital, unless my Chicago grandfather happened to be visiting, for he always carried his doctor's black bag with him. And except for one time on a fishing trip, far from emergency rooms, when my father did the stitching. My wife Ruth, a wizard with needles and thread and a sewing machine, does the stitching on my work clothes, including my very favorite venerable khakis, which have one patch on the left knee and 3 overlapping patches on the right knee, because the right knee is the one I kneel on when I'm gardening and cleaning a stain from the floor. My scars and genes illustrate 3 types of mending. The kind that nature does on its own, as in the healing of small cuts. The kind that combines human skill with nature's regenerative power, as in the healing of wounds with the aid of stitches. And the kind that requires only human tools and skill, as in the sewing of patches on clothes. There is a 4th type of mending, more elusive, harder to explain. Suppose you have quarreled with someone, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, a life partner, over some matter, large or small. Sometimes you even forget what you're arguing about. The anger might persist for hours, for days, for weeks, even for years. Each of you waits for the other to yield. Eventually you realize that hostility is poison. It saps your energy and sours your mood. By and by, one of you offers an apology. The other responds in kind, and gradually the air clears, the anger evaporates. Here, the healing requires no tools, no devices, only the power of mind and heart. In rare instances, entire groups of people, rival tribes, even nations, have overcome their estrangement by peaceful means. This book celebrates all these ways of mending and more, not only as they apply to our bodies and belongings and relationships, but all efforts to heal, repair, renew, reconcile, and otherwise fix whatever is broken or divided or degraded. For every form of damage, from plumbing leaks to polluted rivers, from eroded farmland to shattered friendships, from racism to war, there are potential remedies. I emphasize potential because not all wounds can be healed. Not all losses can be reversed. While I write these pages, children are dying as bombs destroy schools and hospitals and homes in the Middle East. The rubble may eventually be cleared and new buildings may rise from the ruins, but the children are lost forever. Earth's oceans and atmosphere are heating. Corals are bleaching. Fisheries are collapsing. Land species are dwindling toward extinction. Wildfires are burning. Diseases are spreading. Millions of people are on the move, seeking places that are still inhabitable. And everywhere the refugees go, they are met with hostility. These trends may be irreversible. Competing for space and resources, humans divide along religious, racial, class, and other lines, often violently, and nations fall prey to oligarchs and autocrats. It's easy to imagine mending cut fingers, torn clothes, or hurt feelings. It's much harder to imagine ways of repairing the devastation wrought by ethnic feuds and wars, by poverty and pandemics, by pollution, climate disruption, hurricanes, wildfires, floods, and a host of other large-scale troubles. News about the unraveling is only a click away on our screens. It may be visible out your window. It may be scratching your throat with smoke right now. It may be weighing your heart with grief. Awareness of this havoc is a constant ache in my mind as I write. When so much is being torn apart, we can't hope to undo all the damage. But we can undo some of it in our own lives, in our communities, and in the lands and waters we share. We can be agents of healing. My aim in this book is to explore that possibility, to celebrate the capacity for mending we share with the rest of nature. In the face of personal, political, and ecological upheaval, we can either huddle in private sanctuaries, hoping to escape the wreckage, or we can help to mend whatever is within reach. If we choose the path of mending, we may need to learn new skills, to forego certain luxuries, to risk heartbreak. But if enough of us make this choice, and if we band together in our efforts, we can reduce the toll that humans are inflicting on Earth and on one another, and we can count on meeting kindred souls along the way.
Scott, I want to thank you so much for sharing that, for trusting in this community, to trusting your heart and your words with this community, which you've shared many times before. But I do think you're starting with that vulnerability does matter. Because as a writer, literally, you put them on pieces of paper that can be ripped and critiqued and red marked and all that stuff. I want to get into the content of it, but just what did it feel finally presenting it in that way, given the content of what you wrote about?
Well, we all feel, I'm sure I can speak for everyone in this room in this regard, we all feel dismayed by the amount of violence and destruction and damage, not just the current administration in Washington, but all over the world. There is so much undoing of nature, of communities, of individual lives. There's an organization that keeps track of armed conflict, not just random gun shooting, but armed conflict. There are currently 112 armed conflicts between militias, gangs, and of course, nations. So in a context when everyone who might ever pick up a book called In Praise of Mending knows that so much is being damaged every hour, every day, the point that the question that arises in their minds, what's the point of this? It's impossible to undo or to even perhaps to slow the damage. And I feel that as I write. I try to register that in the foreword. I start with little mendable things like a cut. We've all had cuts. And probably most of us have had stitches. If you're more likely, I think, if you're a male than a female, at least that's my experience, boys tend to tear up their bodies more frequently. Many of us have broken bones and had casts and other ways of mending. So you can start with your own body and think about what the body itself does. The body's repairing itself every night, every day. So I start with a kind of healing that we know is possible because we've experienced it. And then I move out gradually in that forward, and of course I do the same in the book. I start with the things that we know we have the skill and the ability to heal. Either our body does it on its own or with help from outside, doctors, medicines, so forth. My dad sewing up my stitches. That, it might seem surprising, but whenever our dogs got into fights, he would sew up the dogs, and I was just another two-legged dog. And
They were four-legged humans, I think is really what he was trying to say to you.
So then I move out to acknowledge the larger and larger and larger kinds of damage that it's harder to imagine mending them. And so that's why I say at the end, and that's what I feel, we can't undo everything, but we can undo something. Whether it's in our home or in our town or in our congregation or in some larger sphere in our business, our nonprofit, our neighborhood, we can all undo some damage. And that's what I feel called to do, and that's why I'm writing about it.
Thank you. One of the things I'm writing about in my doctoral dissertation right now, or preparing to write, is about trying to raise the VQ of congregations, not their IQ or their EQ, but their vulnerability quotient, and particularly around the work of encountering difference through pluralism, including the pluralism within. But I think the equation, which is not scientific, but relates to raising two capacities, which is the capacity for courage in the face of vulnerability, to face vulnerability, and then the resilience to withstand it and sort of integrate what you've learned. And I do think so much of the challenge here between deciphering, is this something that can still be fixed or that is gone beyond repair, is finding that, discernment, but also that inner courage to face it, and to begin figuring out how do I assess the harm and things like that. So I experienced courage in both the sharing, something you haven't published, but also in inviting us to cultivate courage. How do you see courage and resilience related to this clear breakdown that is happening in society?
Well, I started this book long before the scenes that I trust everyone in this room has seen on screens of the people in Minneapolis. The courage there is manifest. And it's a courage in the face of not only threats to themselves as individuals, but what's striking is how light-skinned people have come to the defense of dark-skinned people, adults to the defense of children, and risk their lives, and we know tragically some have lost their lives. So the courage is in there. There's nothing magical or different necessarily about the people of Minneapolis. They're just they're enough deeply empathic, compassionate human beings that can't bear the abuse of their fellow human beings. So I am more hopeful about the courage of ordinary people now than I was when I started this book, because I've seen more instances of it, and not only in Minneapolis, all across this country. And of course, the same thing goes on in other countries. If you counted the number of volunteer physicians who have died in Gaza, they've gone to a war zone to try to heal people, save people's lives. And a lot of them have lost their lives in the process. That is courage. It's also generosity. It's taking the skills that you have and taking to where you feel they're needed, and taking risks in the process. So we have a deeper reservoir of courage, I think, in ordinary people, and certainly compassion, than it's tempting to imagine when you see the headlines. You do not see in the news the kindnesses, the millions and millions of kindnesses and generosities and sharing that people do in this community and every community in the world every day. The neighbors who look out for one another, the children who take care of their parents. the grandparents who look after the little kids, the folks who run shelters for unhoused people. Those don't make the headlines. What makes the headlines is violence and strife and conflict, because it grabs our attention, and that's what the media want. That's what they want, is our attention. So I am far more hopeful about the reservoirs of courage and compassion in ordinary people, including this very ordinary person, than when I started the book.
And I think for me, one of the pieces that jumped out, one of the words that jumped out the most to me in your piece was ache. You said the havoc that people are experiencing throughout the world creates a constant ache in you. And so for me, I'm curious, and I translate ache to somewhat suffering or struggle or psychosocial bodily suffering. And then you spoke to compassion, which is an extension from passion of suffering. And so I'm curious, courage could also just be the answer, but I think one of the challenges is, how do we not close our walls off from the suffering aches of the world and feel like, well, let's just keep everything as good as we can, shelter in place here, but to have that porousness into allowing that ache in, and how can that, without crushing us, how does it not crush you? Where do you find the move from passion of shared passion, compassion?
One bears that through friendship, through community. Maybe within your family, maybe starts there, maybe with other people in your community, maybe in your congregation. The 250 UU ministers out of the 600 ministers that came from all over the country, I think, is a reflection of the presence of powerful compassion in all the UU congregations that I've ever visited. I've probably spoken at 40 congregations around the country, and I've also spoken at the National Convention in Boston. And I've yet to meet a UU who isn't concerned about social justice, about peacemaking, about sharing, about protecting the earth and our fellow creatures, not only the two-legged ones, but all our fellow creatures. I'm going to give a talk at 12:30, and I'm not going to give that talk now. But I just want to use one example from that. I'm part of what we're calling the Traveling University. It's a group of retired Indiana University faculty who are speaking about matters in public for free. We started in Bloomington, and now we're moving to some other county seats and towns in southern part of the state, about matters that are important to us as scholars. I'm not really a scholar, I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I guess, that matter to us, but that we hope will also matter to a lot of members of the public. And some of those subjects that we're speaking about, not what I'm doing today, are matters that the authorities in the White House and in the governor's mansion and in the state legislature of Indiana and in the president's office of Indiana University would rather we not talk about. Slavery, taking the whole continent from the indigenous people and continuing to break all of our treaties and so forth with those people. The Ku Klux Klan having had its national headquarters in Indiana in the 1920s. Gay, lesbian, LGBTQ2 plus people and the biological basis of that. Climate disruption and the scientific basis of that. These kinds of subjects we're being told not to teach because the administration doesn't want people to hear about those things or think about those things. Active faculty members at Indiana University can be, if a student in one student in their class files a complaint saying, oh, this professor's a raving liberal and he talked about this or she talked about that, that person will be put on leave until there's an adjudication as to whether he or she has violated. You're not allowed to talk about diversity, equity, or inclusiveness. You're not allowed to talk about climate. You're not allowed to talk about the history of slavery and the ongoing racism in America. Well, retired faculty members can't be fired. They can't be suspended. And we get our name, and this is, comes back to Reverend Nick's question. We get that odd sounding thing, the traveling university, from Poland. In Poland, several times in its history, there has been an autocrat. And one of the first things that dictators do and autocrats do is to try to control the media and the schools. Schools meaning all levels, all the way up through college. What you can teach, what you can't teach. And in Poland, faculty members could be fired, could in fact be imprisoned for teaching things about Polish history that the current autocrat did not want people thinking about or knowing about. Or things about the economy they didn't want people knowing about. They could lose their jobs. They still taught, but they did it in secret in the public. And so they moved from place to place, and they called themselves the Flying University. And they flew because if they went to the same spot over and over again to give their lectures, they might be found out and lose their jobs. So there's courage in ordinary people. You don't think of, I don't need to be courageous to do it, to come and give a talk here or anywhere for that matter. But my colleagues at Indiana University who are still working can lose their jobs and their pensions if they do something that either the IU administration or the governor or the Republican heads of state committees, legislative committees, if they do something that they regard as objectionable.
I think we got time for maybe one or two comments or questions. I want to be mindful of our chili time and also this wonderful time. And Scott's going to be hanging out, spending time, I hope, spending the rest of the day with us. So, you can corner him as well. But
I came for the chili.
Whoa! Yeah, 1 second. And if you could just say, just do this, and just say your name.
Hi, I'm Holly Creviston, and I'm actually Professor Holly Creviston. I teach at Franklin College, which is a private school, and I haven't had the same pressures that the Indiana University professors are experiencing, although that's extremely scary. But I did want to take this opportunity to make sure that you guys were informed of something that is happening. And what's Todd Rakita's position? He's Attorney General. Okay, sorry. So the Attorney General of the state of Indiana has started a list for teachers in the same it's sort of in the same way that Turning Point had a list for professors, and there aren't any Franklin College professors on the Turning Point list, but basically the way that runs is that individuals can report things that they don't like are happening and things that they consider to be woke, and they are reporting it to this list, and then people that just feel so led are then contacting the universities and their direct department chairs in some cases to try to get them fired. And so this list has now been started in the state of Indiana, and it's called Eye on Education. And it's not just for professors, it's for school teachers. In fact, the Indiana Department of Education has been reported on it several times for just talking about things like race. for example. And that information is put on there. I have a colleague that is on that list for posting something on her personal social media that was derogatory towards, who's the Turning Point guy? Charlie Kirk, on her personal private social media. And our president of Franklin College is listed on there so they can be contacted. Now, Franklin College has dealt with this as a private university would, and they've done what they needed to do, and we're actually still getting like grants and things. For example, we used to have a DEI center, and they've just changed the name of it, and it's literally functioning exactly like it was before, and there's a lot of support for diversity. Indiana University does not have that freedom to do that.
Thanks, Holly. Maybe one more comment or question that anyone has for Scott? Yeah, Phil.
Hi, Philip Rogo here. When you were talking about mending, it made me think of, because you're tying in our bodies and nature, it made me think of grafting. And you talked about how maybe some things can't be undone. Has that analogy of grafting, have you played around with that at all? That those things that can't be undone, maybe there's a new way to go about with a form of growth and healing and wellness?
It depends on what's been undone. Clearly, you and I both know that if children are killed under rubble in Gaza, they're not coming back. There's no way to restore that. Buildings, Gaza can be rebuilt. That is, with enough billions of dollars of investment, physically it can be rebuilt. So it may seem now, and you see just miles and miles of rubble, which is what the whole country has been reduced to make it uninhabitable. It can be made habitable. Ruth and I had a house built a few years ago and worked with a wonderful builder whom we've known for years, and we'd ask him, can you do this, that, or the other? He said, with enough money, we can do anything. So the things that can't be undone are the loss of physical life. Even deep grievances can be overcome. We know that racial divisions, race is a biological, it's nothing. It's skin color, that's all it is. There are cultural differences, but they're not biological differences. And deep racial divisions have been healed. My father was a Mississippi farm boy. He was raised in a white family in Mississippi, and he was never a racist, but he grew up in a culture where black people were talked about in a certain way, and that's just what he took in with his mother's milk. My father, by the time he was in midlife, was working for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, integrating Southern factories that no other Southern white person would do. He changed. He was never a racist, but he had taken in cultural things the way all of us learn things around the kitchen table. And that's a personal instance of what was undone in him. The undone thing was the racism, and that could be corrected, and it was. We have friends who were adamantly, they regarded any kind of non-conventional bisexual sexuality as the norm, and then they have a gay daughter, and suddenly they think, oh, they're human beings. They're just human beings who have different feelings than I do, or than this old book, this old scriptures talks about. And then they get over it. So I think most things that have to do with social relationships can be undone. The damage can be undone. So and if I didn't think that it was worth aspiring to, well, worth trying through the writing of a book, which is probably likely to be my last book, very likely to be my last book. I'm 80 and I'm in good health so far as I know, but the one thing I have said to a friend here already this morning is that the one good trait that the orange guy in the White House has, the one, is that he's old. Because if he were 50, I would really despair. But he's old enough that I have a little less despair. Mortality is hanging around, and I can say that because he's my age, or I'm his age. I'm in better health than he is, actually.
Thank you. Let's give Scott our gratitude this morning. Let's just take a couple seconds to kind of meditate on what we've been hearing today. We have some questions, and then we'll sing our closing hymn.
Follow your love. Care for what you find beautiful, even if it's broken. Mend any relationships that you have allowed to break down, and go in peace.